We're going to bring Tom in here to talk about Rishi Sunak and what he got so wrong last week, just in terms of public relations. I mean, seen as uncaring, seen as out of touch, and he's having to backtrack like Billy-O.
It's remarkable looking at the way that the Chancellor set out his spring statement on Wednesday afternoon. It was received very warmly by the House. While he was delivering that statement, the Tories were very happy, they were cheering, they were almost laughing at Labour, who looked a little bit blindsided by all of the tax cuts that Rishi Sunak had announced. However, in the hours that followed that statement, what we started to see was actually a lot of the provisions that were announced by Rishi Sunak in the House of Commons, well, they didn't quite meet up to the moment when it came to the dealing with the cost of living, of course, which is being hit so heavily by inflation. Some of these tax cuts simply don't match up with indeed even the tax rises that are coming in. So if you look at the broad balance sheet of what the government is taking and what the government is giving back, actually the tax burden as a whole is rising.
Yeah, and look, May elections bringing all of this into the Chancellor's sharp focus because, of course, you know, he's made these decisions and then he's realised, oh, this has gone down really badly.
Look,
so
he had a chance to come out of this a hero, and he chose not to.
I think one of the big issues is whoever was Chancellor, they are facing an almost unprecedented economic situation. Inflation in this country could be getting up to double digits by the end of this year. Indeed, it's higher in the United States. It's about the same level in the European Union. There are some really big challenges and big problems. And of course, debt interest payments that the United Kingdom is paying are over £70 billion this year. That's more than the school's budget going on just paying for the debt that we've accrued.
But all he had to do was to say, I'm not putting up the national insurance hike. We're not doing that.
He could have said that. That would have cost £6 billion that he would not have collected, and that would have added to the debt. Obviously,
well, don't forget the tax revenue that he's generating, which is caused through inflation, which he's decided to bank, and many people cynically think he's keeping that for a pre-election period. There were cynical moves, many people, his critics are saying, and now he's having to row back hard because they've got May elections.
It's certainly true. There are some really big calls there. I mean, for example, there's a bit of mixed communication from the Treasury when it comes to that national insurance rise. Initially meant to raise £12 billion, of course, for the NHS and then for social care. Well, by raising the threshold at which you start to pay it to over £12,000 to match income tax, it's now not going to bring in £12 billion. It's going to bring in £6 billion. But still £12 billion is going to the NHS. So this idea of the hypothecation of the tax that was originally announced has been somewhat undermined. And you're absolutely right to say that the Chancellor is bringing in more VAT receipts than he expected, and there's more money elsewhere than expected. What the Treasury say to that, though, is because interest rates are expected to rise, the cost of servicing the nation's debt will rise too. And so he wants to leave a little bit of breathing space there in case there's any nasty jumps in the future. Now, that also leaves a bit of a war chest closer to an election if he wants to do some giveaways.
The thing about politicians is, why don't they just say what you've just said? Why don't they just speak plain English to people and say, look, I'm between a rock and a hard place here, and just say it like that and explain to people. And but it just comes across as a lack of caring, being out of touch with the crisis that the people in. And will they pay for it at the election? That's the thing.
Well, that is the big question, of course, because there are some really dire situations that people across the country are living through. And I think that to some extent, the government couldn't really do enough, whatever is happening. We know that the wholesale cost of electricity is rising. We know we're going to get an energy security strategy this week. That's separate from the spring statement. But that energy security strategy, that won't come into helping people's pockets for potentially years to come. It's about generating more energy, for example. So there are some really big questions facing this government that will take many months and years to...
Not pretty. Tom, got to leave it there.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed.